Welcome to Decide's video series, the Center for Interdisciplinary Decisions in Ethics. I'm Ali Abbas, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Carl Spetzler, Chairman of Strategic Decisions Group. Carl has a very long history of applying decision analysis in complex problems in very large organizations. Carl, welcome to Decide.
My pleasure.
Well, I'd definitely like to use this opportunity for you to tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the field of decision analysis.
I got into it at Illinois Institute of Technology, which had a strong engineering economics program. Engineering economics was all about time value of money and ROI, but no uncertainty was being considered. And so when I was looking for a dissertation, I asked my advisor and saying, how come there's no uncertainty in engineering economics? He says, now that would make a good dissertation. And so out of that, I started looking at that subject, and particularly what intrigued me was utility theory and corporate risk attitudes. That became my primary topic. But in the research around that, I just found Ron Howard's paper, which was published in '66, Decision Analysis Applied Decision Theory. And obviously all the RAFA and Harvard stuff that was out at that time. And when I finished my dissertation, I decided to give a presentation in Mexico City at the international meeting, which was TIMSS at that time, the Institute of Management Sciences. Ron Howard at that time was a very young president of that organization. And I had been very impressed by, so he was a big star name to me. And when I gave my presentation, he came up afterwards with a guy named Jim Matheson, and they started asking me questions, and in that conversation, it became very clear to me that in this little sliver where I thought I knew more than anybody, these guys had thought about it as deeply as I had, and I could learn stuff from them. And so by the end of the conversation, they said, why don't you come on out and join us for a while, okay? And in fact, I told my wife, I want to do that for a couple of years, learn everything they know, and go back to Chicago where things were going very nicely. And we're still in California with the same colleagues.
And so you went to SRI.
At that time, Ron and Jim Matheson had formed this decision analysis group at SRI International. It's called SRI International today. At that time, it was Stanford Research Institute. And their idea was to create a teaching hospital. Okay? That is, you couldn't really develop decision analysis without working on real cases. This teaching hospital is what I was attracted to. And we did lots of interesting things. I mean, it's amazing when I go back at that time, we worked on things like seeding of hurricanes, the Mars probe and how not to contaminate Mars, the nuclear electricity strategy for Mexico, and corporate applications. I particularly got involved with a lot of the corporate applications, had some big clients, and we figured out how to become consultants on top of becoming decision analysts. And we're increasingly successful with that.
I want to talk also about your role in three organizations. One is Informs, the Decision Analysis Society, also the Society of Decision Professionals. I also want to talk a little bit about the Decision Education Foundation.
I think of Informs as the home for decision analytics or decision analysis. I think of the Society of Decision Professionals as practitioner-driven. There are academicians that are in part of the Society of Decision Professionals that have a bent towards application. But there are many people in Informs DA Society that haven't seen a real decision problem and are working the mathematics on some aspect of decision analytics, okay? So these have different purposes. I think they've become the kind of partnership that we would like to see and are mutually supportive. I hope that the academicians that are part of the Society of Decision Professionals get a lot of research ideas that are then practice value. I'm afraid to say that when I read the Decision Analysis Journal and go through the topics, yes, it'll help promote people in their academic careers, but I don't find much that will help me solve decision problems in practice. Okay, so I think these communities have slowly drifted further apart, and there are a lot of like-minded people with me that want to build the bridges and make it work. And I know you're among those, and I'm very glad we have the same mission. Decision Education Foundation is something that you were there at the start. In fact, you...
we did the course together in Foothill College, a 6 weeks course in the summer.
So we sold SDG in '98, and that was a disaster, and we bought it back in 2001. But when we did that, it was a generation shift. And the elder generation that had started SDG, except for myself, I stayed with SDG, okay? Everybody else went on and said, okay, what else do I do? And in thinking about that, we said, well, we would like to bring the power of this way of thinking to the rest of the world. Back in the 60s and 70s, we thought it would take the world on fire, and it's been a slow acceptance as opposed to rapidly, accepting it. So we started the Decision Education Foundation, and as we thought about how do we get started with this, we said, well, let's start with youth. And can we teach what we teach to graduate students at Stanford to high school students? And you and a couple of others, including myself, decided, let's try it. And at Foothill College, we took high school students and we gave them about a 55-hour course, and it was a great success. I mean, and I remember you saying it's easier to teach people where you don't have to undo the wrong learning than it is to teach some of the graduate students or executives where you have to teach them no. When you make decisions under uncertainty, you can't control the outcome totally. Yeah.
What about your new book, Decision Quality?
Your book that you wrote with Ron Howard, which I consider the textbook in decision analysis, this is the companion book that focuses more on the organizational and the non-analytical part that hopefully puts the framework together.
So where are we going, Carl? What's the future? Where do you think decision analysis is going? Should we be doing things differently? What are your views for the future?
It is my belief that the future is where it's adopted as a way of life in organizations, okay? Our first big success with that is Chevron. Chevron received the Rafa Howard Award. We have an award that the Society of Decision Professionals gives to organizations for adopting it as an organizational competency, deep organizational competency. And they have outperformed their peers. So others are saying, how do we get there? That's very helpful. But once you start raising it from, here's the progression. First you do a decision analysis on a specific decision problem. Then people say, hey, how do we do this as an ongoing process for all of our R&D decisions? And so now you do an R&D decision process in a portfolio management system, and you kind of bring decision quality to a domain of decisions. And then people say, well, if it works here, can it work there? And the ultimate thing is that the organization has a capability and a culture where decisions are made that way. And they all have a common language, they have a deep understanding, they know how to sort decisions. They start with what we call a decision agenda. They end up not being just reactive to what decisions come at me, but they start looking forward and saying, what decisions should we be facing over the next 18 months? How do we sort them? How do we approach them? What is the time cycle? When should they be done? And it becomes a part of how we run this business. I'm hoping to also have some societal applications at the level where there are departments of the federal government, where there's a local government, there's a county in Colorado that seems to have gotten a start. I would like to see almost all the big decisions made this way, and people have it as a skill where they can even apply it to small decisions. The difference between making a really good decision and what people normally do is like doubling the value with no more cost. And it's just amazing. It's the most, we can't afford in the future to leave that much value on the table. We don't have that many resources as a society. So my mission is to bring that as fast as we can to as many people as we can.
Thank you very much, Carl. This has been great. It's been a real pleasure.